Thank you, Deputy Chief Provost. I'll start the questioning with Chief Morgan. Obviously I'm concerned about the continued flow of unaccompanied children for a host of reasons. Because we have not ended the incentives for people to come into this country illegally, children continue to take a very dangerous journey through Mexico to come to this country, and lives are being lost and assaults are perpetrated on, and these children become real victims. Talk a little bit about how the flow of unaccompanied children, how that overstresses your resources and how it distracts from your other missions.
Yes, sir. So I refer to the Border Patrol's involvement with UACs and family units as one of humanitarian at this point. We know that basically of the OTMs, which now is about 63% of our apprehensions, and to include the single-family males, focusing on just UACs and family units alone on the OTM side, it's about 43-44% of our overall apprehensions. RGV alone, it's probably closer to around 50%. That takes an exorbitant amount of resources and funding to sustain those operations, knowing that basically 100% of those family units and UACs are released into the United States. That's why I call that a humanitarian mission. I refer back to on a midnight one evening, I was in a sector where I saw a 6-year-old and an 11-year-old holding each other's hands that had made the trek from Honduras. I don't refer to that 6-year-old and 11-year-old as a national security or law enforcement threat. But again, the Border Patrol is dedicating a tremendous amount of resources, taking those folks in, processing them. At times, a lot of resources are dedicated to being professional child care providers at this point. In RGV alone, we've actually just established a second CPC, a processing center in RGV. Each one of those processing centers takes about 100 to 120 agents to man, dedicated basically 100% to processing and taking care of the family units and UACs. We just recently opened up a temporary holding facility in Torino to help with that. Ursula, as I know everybody's familiar with, that comes at a high cost as well to be able to run that facility and provide the resources. I recently, when I traveled to RGV, the PAC, the supervisor that was in charge, said, you know, Chief, we're going to do whatever this country asks us to do, but I never thought in my 20 years that I would be, as part of the procurement, ordering baby powder and baby wipes. Actually, I just got from one sector where agents, one of their jobs during the day is to actually make sure that the food, the burritos that were provided, are being warmed properly. It takes a tremendous amount of resources to do this.
Can you talk about, the realities on the border when you have a flood, let's say 50 or 100 unaccompanied children, family members, the way they can be used as diversion for higher value smuggling, whether it's drugs or human or sex trafficking? I mean, isn't that the reality of what's actually happening?
Yes, we have information on that. Absolutely. Smugglers use that as a distraction. Yes, sir. And, again, the resources, it absolutely is impacting. As a Chief of the United States Border Patrol, I'm comfortable in saying is that the mission the humanitarian mission with the UACs and family units, it is impacting our ability to perform, I think, our national security law enforcement mission. I am taking a considerable amount of resources and agents from away from the border to take care of this mission.
So this is a problem we have not solved, and I'll quote back in July 9th, 2014, when Chairman Carper at the time called a hearing on this. Senator Carper said, how do we change the mindset to turn off the flow so the parents will say, I want my kids to stay here, have an opportunity, have a future here? How do we do that? And I think it's the right question in terms of how do we stop the flow. Now, I think we probably have some difference of opinions in terms of the effective way to stop the flow. I think Senator Carper, again, I would love to improve the conditions in Central America so there's not the incentive, the push factor, but I'm always talking about the pull factor. And if we put up our other chart of just UACs, we see that of the children that have come here unaccompanied in 2013, 14, 15, and 16, at least the last 3 years, we're returning less than 4%. And so isn't the reality that if you come as an unaccompanied children from Central America and you get into this country, and by the way, it's easy to get in here. You just walk across the bridge, turn yourself in, and you're apprehended, you're processed, and dispersed. And they have access to social media, so more children, more families in Central America realize, and it creates an incentive, pay the fee, take the dangerous journey, because if you get into America, you're going to stay. Isn't that an enormous problem and one of the reasons why we haven't solved this problem?
Yes, sir. When we talk about push-pull, if we go back just a little while, 2006, 90% of those we were apprehending were Mexican nationals, and now we're at 36%. Why? Well, there's a couple of things that happen why we see that dramatic decrease. One is a solid consequence delivery system. There's a couple of things that happen. One is we instituted ER, expedited removal, so that the individuals knew that when they came, they were being held and then they were being removed. That was a consequence. They knew that, and it served as a strong deterrence. The other thing, one example.
Let me just interrupt you. So that's with Mexicans.
Yes, sir.
Or Canadians. But talk about the difference between Mexicans and unaccompanied children or family units from Central America.
Yes, sir. So what's happening with the UACs and the family units, the OTMs as we call them from Central America, is it's basically the same thing. Is right now they know that if they make it to the border, they will be released into the interior of the United States. Generally, that's done through an NTA, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with, the notice to appear. Border Patrol, we don't do that. We process them as we normally do, and we hand them over to the next agency in the whole government approach, and then that is done. But that's the reality, is they come to the borders, and they are being released. And what that does is it sends a strong message to those folks in the country that if you get to the United States border, we're going to let you in. That's a huge pull factor.
If we'd go back to the process of expedited removal, with humanity, bring these kids and send them right back to Guatemala, Honduras, or El Salvador, we would dramatically reduce the incentive, and my guess is we would dramatically reduce the flow. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir, and that's why I was using the Mexican national example, because we use that same concept, and again, from 2006, we went from 90% to 36%. We reduced that pull factor by instituting a system of consequences and expedited removal. Yes, sir.
And Deputy Chief Provost, I don't know that you were involved, but we had a surge from Brazil, and Secretary Chertoff at the time had expedited removal, and the surge ended. Is that correct?
Yes, so in 2005, we did have a surge from Brazil. We had received the authority to conduct expedited removals starting the year prior. We did start utilizing that, and when we delivered the consequence of the expedited removal and then actually the physical removal to Brazil, the numbers did decrease.
Okay, thank you. My time's expired. Senator Carper.